Hello, St. John's family. I want to bring a word to you from Luke chapter 7, verse 7. A centurion is speaking to Jesus. Only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. I'm thinking about Luke chapter 7, beginning with verse 1. Let's hear it together. After Jesus had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. There was a centurion there who had a slave whom he highly valued and who was ill and close to death. When he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him, asking him to come and heal his slave. When they came to Jesus, they appealed to him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy of having you do this for him, for he loves our people, and it is he who built our synagogue for us." And Jesus went with them. But when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but only speak the word, and let my servant be healed. For I also am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and the slave does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And he said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." When those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the slave in good health. I love this passage, and it's familiar to many of us. What we can learn from Jesus' example as we think about our own roles and responsibilities in this strange and stressful time, I think is considerable. But these facts stand out to me as I see Jesus at work responding to a crisis. The first thing that I see here in this passage is that Jesus entered a city. He entered Capernaum. You know, he grew up in Nazareth, which at the time was a very, very small village, but he moved into a more populated area around the Galilee. He may have begun his public ministry in the desert, praying, but he didn't stay in the desert. He went back to the Galilee, where he spent much of his time in those cities surrounding the sea. Capernaum was a frontier city in Galilee. Remember, it was where Peter and Andrew and James and John worked and had their fishing business. It's also where he met Levi, remember Matthew, the tax collector, and called him to follow him as well. Jesus wanted to be where the people are, where the needs were. Jesus loved to be where the lost sheep were. You know, I'm glad that we live in the city. Sometimes, at times like this, especially with the virus roaming around, we may wonder, is it good to be in a populated area like this? You know, Jesus loved to be where the people are. Jesus loved to be where the needs are. And I love being in the city because Jesus loved the city. This is a place where he is at work. And secondly, Jesus listened very carefully. Did you catch that? We're told that some Jewish friends of a centurion, came to Jesus and explained that his servant was very sick. And so they pleaded that he might come and heal him. Evidently, the centurion is the one who built the synagogue in Capernaum, and he was a God-fearer, a Gentile who loved God's people and honored the commandments. And they wanted to do something good for him and for his servant. And more than likely, they spent some time explaining to Jesus the whole background story and all the things that the centurion had done for them. We actually stood on the Byzantine synagogue site under which this synagogue was laying beneath the dirt. And we didn't actually go to this synagogue when we visited Israel, but we were very close there. And it's a beautiful spot overlooking the Sea of Galilee. But I can imagine this conversation that they had with Jesus, and he was listening the whole time, listening carefully. And it reminds me again that listening to the needs of others in itself is a very healing act. Never underestimate the power of just hearing someone. Hearing is a healing thing to do. It's a healing thing to be heard. And Jesus listened very carefully with his ears. Later, we're told that Jesus was amazed at the centurion's faith and that he applauded that faith publicly. When we listen to others and when we affirm their cry for help as Jesus did and their faith in God, we give them a tremendous gift. And you and I can do that right now as we listen to one another during these extraordinary times. And thirdly, we learn that Jesus went. Jesus went. Jesus cared enough to actually go to the place of need. But notice that healing and helping the servant did not require Jesus' physical presence, just his compassion. He actually didn't make it even to the front door of the centurion's house. He just spoke the word. And I think it's important for us to remember, especially right now, we can convey compassion for others without physical contact. We can convey compassion through our phone calls, through our emails, through our prayers, and know that those prayers and those conversations, even from a distance, are an avenue through which God does his healing work. Remember some of the studies that have been done on the power of prayer. I'm thinking about Dr. Dale Matthews of Georgetown, who wrote this about the effects of spiritual disciplines and prayer on his patients. He wrote, "I have seen my patients with cancer and heart disease, plus hypertension, diabetes, migraines, rheumatoid arthritis, and more get better faster, get better unexpectedly, and cope better with remaining symptoms when the resources of faith are linked with the resources of medicine." Isn't that awesome? That's the faith factor, and I love that book. But finally, I want to share this. Jesus was in charge. Jesus was not just in charge, actually. He was first in charge. As Jesus approached the house, the centurion sends friends to greet him and says, "Lord, don't even bother coming under my roof. You don't need to do that. Just say the word, and I know my servant will be healed." And then he explains, "The reason is that I know I'm a man under authority like you are. And if I say to a soldier, 'Go,' he will go. And if I say to another, 'Come,' he will come." In essence, the centurion was saying to Jesus, "Lord, you are my superior. You are my first officer. You are the one to whom I report." And remember, centurions had a lot of power and authority. They commanded everywhere from 100 to 1,000 men. They were brave. They were courageous. They were often the first in battle, in the front lines, and they served in a sacrificial way. This was a tremendous compliment by a centurion to Jesus himself. They were brave, and they knew what it meant to be in charge. But the centurion says, "Lord, you are first in charge." You know, I'm thinking about, I was never in the military, but I'm thinking about a time when I was on a crew team, and some of you have heard stories about that. The guy who was in charge on my boat was the coxswain, the guy who steered the boat, and he was the one that relayed all the important instructions. He told us if our catch was early or late, and he was helping us to get in line and to row in such a way to win. And if the coxswain gave you directives and you didn't follow them, that could be bad news. If you were late to the catch, you might do what we call catch a crab, where your blade was sucked under the water. And I may have shared before, I saw a 190-pound guy ejected from the boat when the oar slammed into his gut and he was ejected from the boat. So we listened to what the coxswain said. We trusted him. And I loved James, and I trusted him in that boat to lead us to victory, or at least, you know, to finish the race, and to know that we did our best. When we say to Jesus, "You're first in charge," we're saying, "You are my superior. I'm going to listen to you. I trust you to get me to the finish line." Jesus asks one thing of you and me today. Will you trust me to be in charge? Will you follow as I lead you through the battles of life, knowing that I have overcome the world? We can be like Jesus in the sense that we love the city and its people. We can be like Jesus in the sense that we can listen to people patiently and care for them as Jesus did. We can be like Jesus as we go to the hurting places and pray for God's healing work. But in one way, Thank God we cannot be like Jesus, and that is, we cannot be first in charge. We cannot be Lord of all. We cannot be King of heaven and earth. Only our risen Savior can fill that job description as we meet the real challenges of life. And so let's say this before sundown, just as the centurion and just as his sick servant said before sundown, Lord, I trust you to be first in charge, to be my superior, to take me to the finish line safely, to trust you with my life from beginning to end. And that's something else to think about today.